We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Boxing Ego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Sad but true. Jaron boots Ennis. He linked up with Eddie Hearn, rematch room, and the pickings is looking slim. Instead, what you have nowadays is almost back and forth, a bunch of name dropping. But when will Jaron boots Ennis get the big fights that he is after? He definitely has the talent. He's a skilled fighter. He looks to be special. And as I've always stated, the thing that's going to push Jaron Ennis over the line is the right dance partner. Will he get that? That's what I want to explore in this video. Now, I came across this. There was an article on Boxing Scene, link in the description. And it's from Lance Pugmire. It says, in the case of Jaron Ennis, there was a better way than settling for the mandatory. Who else said that? I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to think. Who else stated that? Me. That's who. It's so funny in boxing when I say these things, people act like I'm speaking another language, like they can't understand what ego is saying. And then almost always you see other voices in the sport of boxing, be it boxing fans, reporters, boxers, people who are trainers. They come out and start saying what ego's been telling you. Says, when the gifted and unbeaten welterweight talent Jaron boots Ennis decided to join Eddie Hearn's rematch room, many of the dream phrases that have been denied Ennis were uttered. Holding the IBF is one of the boxing glamours in one of boxing's glamour divisions, places Jaron front and center for some of the biggest fight in the sport, and we plan to deliver them for him, Eddie Hearn said back then, right? Peep this. Yet on the heels of Jaron Ennis's homecoming fight against a faded David Avocado in July, Ennis finished him in 5 rounds. Hearn has not found a way to escape a mandatory IBF rematch against Karen, right? This is a guy Jaron already fought. Not only does Ukraine's DAZN bring nothing to the table and add intrigue or interest to the match, he's only 19 months removed from being swept by Ennis. The scorecards were 120 to 108 on all 3 judges' scorecards in a bout that took place in Washington. So what does this mean? Boxing Ego let you know, I told you I'm the best in the business. Count on me. The stuff I say actually happens. I'm that good. Jaron Ennis is likely to fight Karen Hadouken or whatever his name is. Hadouken! Whatever this guy's name is. He already fought him. The scorecards were wide. It was a horrible, terrible fight. So what is happening is, since Eddie Hearn and Rematch Room and DAZN and Turki, whoever's working with Jaron boots Ennis, since they can't deliver big fights for him, but they've already secured him in a multi-fight deal. So now we're hearing sidebar conversations and side quests about, oh, we offered money to Mario Barrios. Oh, we sent Brian Norman Jr. an offer and these guys turned it down. Oh, Crawford doesn't want to fight us. That's 3 different people, 3 different situations. Crawford, he's with Turki / free agent. Top Rank has Brian Norman Jr. and Mario Barrios is with PBC Al Heyman, right? So here's the skinny of it, mate. The reality is, in life, and I want you guys to believe what Boxing Ego is telling you. It's funny that you guys, a lot of people get it. I can't front. A lot of people will listen to my page and listen to my content and they just get it off top. But there's some usual suspects that try to go against the grain. In life, hear me loud and clearly, nobody cares. Life is about do or don't, pass or fail. You either execute or get executed, period. And in the case of Jaron Boots Ennis, the fights that he was promised haven't been delivered, and he's about to be on his second fight. And we don't look any closer to getting any of these fights. So this is what I've been saying. And now it's going to be a bunch of name dropping and things like that. The Karen rematch is bad. It says it's an astounding situation considering so many factors, right? Eddie Hearn has long come across as one of the most astute, eloquent individuals in the sport. There are a variety of routes to take to bypass an IBF mandatory, including the request of an exception that other promoters have employed in the recent past. At age 27, Boots Ennis is ascending to his peak. Taking this fight only wastes days on the calendar of a rare talent who has drawn comparisons to Roy Jones Jr. Didn't I just say that? It just takes into. Y'all must have forgot. And has seen welterweight champs Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence take measures to avoid fighting Ennis. By all accounts, Matchroom is in sufficient financial shape to make the kinds of fights that Hearn originally spoke of, but the promotion was unable to propose an offer that could make or move either PBC or Top Rank to arrange a welterweight unification bout that would have allowed Ennis to avoid a repeat mandatory assignment. In a text message to Boxing Scene on Wednesday, Eddie Hearn wrote, "We have made significant offers to Ennis's fellow welterweight champions." Asked about that, an official connected to Top Rank's newly crowned Brian Norman said of the Matchroom offer, "Too late and not enough." Boom. So keep in mind, this article came out before Jaron Ennis did that interview saying they turned down an offer. Top Rank says it's too late and it's not enough money. What is going on here? So if you have a fighter as good as Boots, you know the competition is going to want to feel satisfied with the financial demands. So you got to have to pay him. I feel like this is the problem I let you guys know was to come with the Boots and Matchroom Eddie Hearn marriage. They got a talent, an American talent. They're going to have to overpay him. Likely they had to overpay him to pull him and lure him from working closely. He wasn't signed with PBC, but he worked closely on PBC cards and he was with Showtime. And to lure him, I'm assuming they outlined, we can get you big fights and we're going to give you more pay in these fights. So they upped his pay scale and the fans were good with that. Your boy Ego, the day the news came out, I went on live. I made videos about it and I gave you my honest opinion. And surprisingly, or should I say, if you know my channel, not surprisingly, I don't take back anything I said. I question this partnership. Getting paid more money, yes, that's good. But how much more are you really getting for the opportunities? Because here's the thing. Boots fought Karen the first time on Gervonta Davis card in DC, which was lit. It actually had a great live gate, etc. And it had Demetrius Andrade. Now they're trying to make Boots a main event, but the only place that he can probably generate at this point a great live gate as a main event without the proper dance partner is in Philly. So you're just going to burn out Philly and he's going to keep fighting avocados and guys like Karen Part 2 that nobody wants to see really either of those fights, and then just put them at home. The problem with this is simple, and I stated this from the beginning. Think about this as a business, right? I implore you, I need you guys to think about this from the perspective of a business. If you have a fighter who is special or looks special, and that fighter is talented, such is the case with Jaron Boots Ennis. He is from Philly, meaning that's his hometown, that's his space, that's his base. He doesn't have a problem generating fans where he's from. That's like I'm in the Bay Area, E40's from Vallejo. Woke up in the AM. Toasted on my, gotta take a to the dump in the Mediterranean. He's already popping in the Bay Area. You don't need E40 to do a million shows in the Bay Area to pop, because the Bay Area already loves E-Feezy. Thought y'all Feezy. Fools member? Lil Brat and De Niro. Them boys from Vallejo. So the point I'm making is you don't have to build the star power of the star in their hometown. And this is showing you that Eddie Hearn is not necessarily versed with America. He's like fresh out of ideas. He UK, I don't know what he got going over there, Saudi Arabia, whatever, cool. But right here in America, you don't know what you're doing. You know, you're still learning at best. Because again, why do you have Jaron Ennis and you're going to keep putting him in Philly? He's already popping in Philly. He got Gillian Wallow. They got a top podcast. They speak well of him. He did a good live gate with David Avenesian. So it's like, that's not even a market that you can always come back to that market, if that makes sense. There's no real rush there because Philly fans are always hold their person down, right? You even see people who aren't from Philly or from a particular city, but they played in that city and they become iconic. Like Kobe Bryant is not from LA. He's from Philly and he used to live in Germany. But because he played so many years and finished his career, rest in peace, Black Mamba, with the Lakers, he's been immortalized and everybody in LA loves Kobe because he brought ships back to LA, right? So the Snoop Dogs and Kendricks in the Game and Nip, rest in peace of Nip. These guys all love Kobe. Not that he's from LA, but because he played in LA. Same thing in Philly. Who did Iverson play with? The 76ers. Allen Iverson is not from Philly, but he played his heart out and he has so many memorable moments that Allen Iverson has become synonymous and iconic with Philadelphia culture. So you have people who in sports are transplants. Like there's guys who they're not from the Bay Area, but they came and made their name in San Francisco. Therefore, they get, embraced by the populace. So transplants. So imagine someone who is an athlete from the place, in the place, of course, they're going to have the adoration and have the support where they're from if they're good, if they're like top quality athletes, such is the case with Jaron Boots Ennis. So it's really pointless to keep putting brainless fights with Jaron Ennis together and then just sticking him in Philly where he's already a factor. You notice PBC, Tank Davis, I was at his last fight in Baltimore and it was against Ricardo Nunes. This was many moons ago. This fight, because I haven't even covered any fights. I barely even cover fights live anymore since the pandemic. So it's been like 4 years since I've really been covering fights. And I went to the Tank fight in Baltimore. So you notice PBC, what they've done, somebody who actually understands the landscape in the business in America, in boxing, they don't just keep shoving Tank Davis in Baltimore. That's too easy. That's like, but then you look at other promoters, especially with black fighters, they don't, it's like they don't know how to promote or what to do with the black fighter. So therefore they just shove them where they're from. Like Top Rank, they'll keep, when they had Terrence Crawford, just keep putting him in Nebraska, keep putting him in Lincoln, put him in Omaha. Yeah, Omaha. But then when you look at Crawford now and people wonder like, man, this guy's really good, but he's not bigger. You got to look at the business. It's not that he's not a great fighter. It's how he's moved his career, decisions he's made, and who he's fought, blah, blah, blah. That's why Crawford's not bigger a brand despite being very talented. Same thing when Shakur Stevenson was with Top Rank. How many times he fight in Newark? But again, one, Shakur's fans was leaving in Newark in his last fight, so that was a bad look. But That's just so unoriginal. Just put put a black fighter where they're from and then call it a day, and then put some more black Keyshawn Davis on the undercard. That's the play for Shakur Stevenson. Now, Shakur Stevenson, same thing. He's clearly the Z side to Tank Davis. They're putting him on the undercard in Saudi Arabia. You see how this is working out? Like, these aren't, especially with the American fighters and black American fighters at that, these other promoters aren't really uplifting the black fighter in America and making them any closer to stardom or household names. Can Terrence Crawford fight? Absolutely. Is Shakur a great fighter? Absolutely. Is Jaron Boots Ennis a great fighter? Absolutely. But here's the thing. There seems to be no real strategy to make them household names. Back to Jaron Ennis, because I don't want to get too sidetracked with top ranked fighters and stuff. It's just a pattern I noticed, particularly with black American fighters. But narrowing the focus back to Jaron Ennis, getting him popping in Philly, what is that even about? The thing is, to become a household name, you usually have to be on the road a little bit, right? You have to, like, you look at Tank. Tank's probably the gold standard. Him and Canelo, the faces of boxing, right? Tank, they put him in LA. They put him in DC, which is close to Baltimore, but not actually in Baltimore, right? They've only put him in Baltimore in the last few years one time. They put him in Texas with Leo Santa Cruz, right? And he had a crazy knockout during the pandemic in that fight. They put him in New York with Rolly. They put him in Vegas for the big fight, like Ryan Garcia, and the big fight with his fight with Frank Martin. They put him in Atlanta a few times, Gamboa, Barrios. So you see, they're putting a black fighter in different markets, not just sticking him in Baltimore every time. Look at Jaron Ennis. Just keep putting him. When he was with PBC, he wasn't just fighting in Philly. And I know it might sound like a privilege, but there's also distractions and different things that come with fighting at home. You're fighting at home. Some people have hometown hijinks, because to be honest, I thought he was going to knock out Avanesian in the ring, in the rounds. Not like he's not able to continue. I thought it was going to be like more vicious. You dig? So I see it how I see it. And I just feel like expect the Karen fight. And this is a good article, very good article written up, which is basically summarizing what I've already told you about. Like, Eddie Hearn made all these promises to Jaron Ennis. It says another boxing official who similarly spoke on the condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of financial negotiations, said Hearn previously called his offer to PBC Mario Barrios substantial. They said it was laughable, alleging it was said only to appease Jaron Ennis and his respective father trainer. See, now we got some. So basically, Top Rank said too late and not enough. So what that means is Brian Norman probably already has his fight lined up. That's probably why they're saying too late. And then they're saying it's not enough. Like, this is not enough to move us to get our champion to fight probably in Philly versus Jaron Ennis. So it's just business stuff. Then you have somebody else who's a source to Lance Pugmire, and Eddie Hearn did interviews saying it was a substantial offer. They're saying it's laughable, and they said it was only said publicly to appease Jaron Ennis and his father trainer. So I hope you guys see the play. It's so easy for Boxing Ego to see it. I don't see why more people aren't on board. The oldest trick in the book: you're fighting a horrible fight that nobody wants to see, which is Karen Part 2. Very hard to sell. You know how that's going to be received by boxing fans in the public, especially after fighting David Avocado. Your Cody Crowley fight lost. You lost out because he wasn't medically cleared. So you brought in a worse fight. Okay, late terms, late replacement, whatever, but it still wasn't a big fight, right? You can't secure, you lured Jaron Ennis, you're overpaying him, and you've made all these promises probably to get him. And now that you've lured him in to your network, you can't provide him with the big fights. So you have to keep overpaying him. And now you have a choice. You can either make it appear to be your fault and say like, hey, I know I promised you all these things, but I can't get these fights, these big fights, over the line for you. I don't have a great working relationship with PBC, so I can't get you the Barrios fight, a champion. Bob Arum says, I don't know what I'm doing in America, Eddie Hearn, so I can't get you the Norman fight. So now it just becomes a finger pointing and blame game for why you can't provide Jaron Ennis with the adequate fights that he needs to bolster his career. And that's just what it is, and that's how I see it. And I think now it becomes a game of finger pointing. This is exactly what happened to Demetrius Andrade when he was over there with Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn was overpaying Demetrius Andrade for fights that weren't going to be successful, but then there were also fights where you're not going to make a bunch of money from it. Andrade in Rhode Island. Again, just stick a black fighter where they're from. You're fighting in a main event in Rhode Island. Maybe put them in New York, Verona, or somewhere like that. And then he's fighting Artur Akov and all these fights that nobody wants to see, and you can't secure the big dog fights that will move the needle for his career. And then instead of just admitting that and people realizing it, let's just say everyone's ducking Andrade when he was with DAZN. Let's just say that Jaron Boots Ennis is the boogeyman. I mean, it's very easy to see. I don't know why more people don't pick up on this, but it is what it is. It says in a story quoted Hearn, it was written, Ennis is in a position to take control of the division. Hearn says he wants Ennis to unify the division. Hearn says, I think they're achievable, realistic fights because Stanionis and Barrios need a big fight and he will be the big fight for him. That statement required an asterisk. It says, unless you go cheap. When he struck the deal to leave Showtime for DAZN and Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, Jaron Boots Ennis says, I can't wait to continue making my mark and becoming undisputed world champion. He hasn't taken one significant step closer to that pursuit with Rematch Room. And the surprising part of that is how Hearn only needed to look across the street to see how others have navigated the stipulations that come with being the IBF champion. Mainly the sanctioning body's leadership push to enforce mandatory fights. A couple recent cases show how to wind through these mandates. First, look at Bakaram Murtazailov, right? And he's basically giving some examples of people who have found bigger fights and navigated through the waters of IBF mandatories. PBC did the same thing in May with Canelo Alvarez and IBF mandatory challenger William Skull, placing Skull on a non-pay-per-view undercard while gaining an exception for Alvarez to fight against Jaime Munguia. Right? Yet in the case of Jaron Boots Ennis, Rematch Room and Eddie Hearn let a deadline date this week expire without requesting an exception, leaving the bout subject to a purse bid open to other promoters by September 3rd if Matchroom doesn't finalize the deal by itself. So again, the stage is already set. This came out well before Jaron did the interview where he said Brian Norman ducked him. Eddie Hearn knows the business in terms of how to get an exception. When he had Kell Brook and Kell Brook's eye got battered and he had orbital surgery versus Gennady Golovkin after that fight, they didn't, through the IBF, they didn't want to go immediately in with the Errol Spence fight, so they requested a medical exception. Eddie Hearn knows this, and if you were really trying to make these fights, or you thought you could make these other fights with Barrios or Norman, and it wasn't just a scapegoat to blame others and name drop, then you could have tried to request an exception, say, hey, I'm working on something, I'm really close to getting a fight not named Karen, so give me a little bit more time. This article is telling you, and I'll put the link in the description, that they didn't even do that. So again, you guys can play all this and point the finger and say all these fighters are ducking Boots, or just come to grips with the fact and reality Boots will fight Karen, and that's likely. So now it's just about setting up the stage and the play of why he has to fight him. But ultimately for me, that doesn't even matter. Why he has to fight him is because of him and his choices. People have this weird thing that they do in the world of boxing. They will place the blame on almost everybody but the fighter himself, but it is the fighter themselves who they have opportunities and situations and they make choices, but then instead of having the fighter being held accountable and live and die by the choices you make, you made your bed, now lie in it, they want to blame someone else. It was Jaron Ennis and his father and trainer Bozy Ennis that decided, hey, Andy Cruz is over there with Eddie Hearn. We're free agents. You know, unfortunately, Cameron Duncan had passed. They got out of their contract, became free agents, and they said, hey, we'll hear out Eddie Hearn. They heard him out, and then they signed with him. That is your choice. You could have stayed with PBC. I'm sure PBC, you weren't with PBC, but you were with Showtime. But I'm sure PBC would have signed you. But the thing is, PBC is not in the business of losing money. So they probably would have signed you for less money, but they would have done more for you. And then you build up to the bigger paydays. To me, it looked like what it's always looked like from the beginning. And I said this, Jaron Ennis's team, they were short-sighted. They're like, Eddie Hearn, you know, he's doing a good job at Andy Cruz. We got a guy over there. And, you know, they have all these like press conferences that look pretty nice, photographs and things like that. And they're willing to pay us more per fight. But you got to think long term. You got to think long term. It's cool to get paid more per fight early, but I would rather get paid a little bit less up front for the long term of it. You know what I mean? And then now when these fights aren't being secured for Jaron Ennis, people want to act brand new, like, oh, how did this happen? And blame game and finger point about who's ducking and stuff. Because of the prior bribery scandal, the IBF, more than the three other sanctioning bodies, works to keep firm rules in place for its mandatory challengers. Errol Spence, blah, blah, blah. What does this Eddie Hearn relationship, Boots and Eddie Hearn relationship, what this does to the relationship is unknown. Perhaps he is listened fully to his promoter's explanation, accepts it, and is happy with his purse money. What's clear from reviewing the past is that for boxing fans who yearn for the marquee fighters to participate in competitive bouts, there is a better way and a shrewder approach. Great article from Lance Pugmire. Check that out in the comment section or in the description. I will put that. And again, we got to start getting to the accountability, people, where you make choices in your career, then own them. Live and die. It's just like, we see this all the time with these new age streamers and stuff, Gen Z streamers. You want to say this crude and you want to act unapologetic and say whatever you want to say. And then when cancel culture comes to find you because you out of pocket saying crazy stuff, then they deleting tweets and issuing apologies. Nah, stand on business of what you were saying. Say that stuff again. You know what I mean? Jaron Ennis, he picked his home. And he picked it with Eddie Hearn. And he decided that would be the best. Now these are the fights that you're getting. Enjoy. You know, I'm telling you, that fight with Karen is really bad. This does nothing. And the sad part is, Ennis is the type of fighter where he's too good to keep fighting middle of the road guys, smaller guys like Thomas Delorme. That doesn't do anything. And boxing is looking real cap. For example, when Virgil Ortiz, after Ennis, he fought Thomas Delorme at 54. We know Delorme is not a 54-pound fighter for real. So the reality is you should expect Virgil Ortiz to have won that fight, which he did in like the first or second round, right? So when he fought someone who on paper is competitive, Sergey Bohachuk, WBC interim champion, notice that fight was actually competitive. See how that works? When it's a matchup that you think should provide some excitement and be a good fight, notice it oftentimes is. If it's a matchup like Shakur versus Joe Cordina and Boots versus Karen 2, that you, in your mind, when you hear about it, you're like, I don't want to see that. And then when it happens, you're going to understand, hey, it looks just like the first fight. And you're going to understand why it doesn't happen. So to be honest, I like Jaron Ennis. You guys know on my page, I've always kept it real. I've always stated that. I still like him. But it was always a questionable decision to link up with Eddie Hearn, because let's say you move up to 154. You were already with the people who had majority of the fights that I would even want to see you fight at 154. And the thing is, Boots is pushing 30 now, and he looks big for the division. So I know he keeps saying he wants undisputed and stuff like that, but how long can you even keep making this weight class? And here's the other thing. I could do this all the time. I could go for an hour about this subject. When will the fans start holding people accountable? See, when it's something good, they sing your praises. Like, people say Turki saved boxing. He has endless money. Okay, then why can't we see Crawford versus Boots? If Crawford is with the same people, Boots is with the same people. Crawford's last fight was with Turki and Eddie Hearn. Boots signed with Eddie Hearn, who works with Turki. Why can't I see this? People talking about Brian Norman ducked and Barrios ducked. Why can't I see this? These people, Brian Norman's with Top Rank. Barrios is with PBC. These two people are on the same network. Why can't I see Virgil Ortiz versus Boots? These are all great fights. But again, people can't deliver the fights, so it just becomes a finger pointing name game. Boots is not getting any of these fights that are near and dear here. Boots versus Madrimov. Boots versus Sergey Boachuk. These are all great fights. I don't know why Boots wants to even stay at 147. Is looking dry. I understand wanting to be undisputed, but the division's looking too dry. So what do? You know, what do? You just keep staying at 47 and try to milk 47, and you can't get the unifications. So there's a lot of questions here, and ultimately time will reveal what it is and what it ain't. But for me, I feel like I've always felt, that Boots was short-sighted in signing with Eddie Hearn and DAZN, because until I see him get a major fight that boosts his career more so than what he was already doing, then it looks like you probably should have stayed on the path you were on. These fights do nothing for me, and I know I speak for boxing fans who say that. Boots is too good to be fighting a recycle rematch that nobody even wanted to see, and people didn't even like the first fight. If I'm lying, I'm flying. Let me know what you rate this fight, the first fight, on a scale of 0 to 10, because I love watching Boots fight. This was his worst fight that I could recall. Point blank, period. So not only is it a rematch that doesn't need to happen, the scorecards were like 120 to 108 or whatever, right? 120 to 108 on all three judges' scorecard. Why do I need to see a rematch to a fight that was a blowout like that? And then it's not even it's not like Mayweather Canelo 2, which I don't really need to see a rematch for that based on the first fight. But if they would have did an immediate rematch, it would have at least made a lot of money. This is a fight that doesn't tick any of the check boxes, doesn't make a lot of money. It's not intriguing. It's not a great stylistic matchup. And the first fight wasn't good. And it was a Boots won by wide margin. And again, you guys can say I'm crazy, but when you see that Boots versus Karen 2 flyer come out, then kiss my ass, right? People saying, oh no, all these people are duck. I don't care about none of that. When that Boots Ennis versus Karen, when the flyer dropped, didn't say something to me. I've already seen this movie before. Eddie Hearn can't deliver Boots the bigger fights. They're not being made. So it's Andre 2.0. You know, it's Crawford with Top Rank 2.0. where Crawford, great fighter, lone man on the island, Top Rank had no big fights, and then the big fight like Pacquiao that they could have made, they didn't make for whatever reason when they were both with Top Rank. So then it just becomes, oh, everybody on PBC's ducking. I mean, good luck. Seen this movie before. We unpacked.